for the university. I won't speak for the Library and Archives of Canada, but I think it's an exciting day for Canada and hopefully for LAC. So we're delighted to have all of you here today, including the Librarian and Archivist of Canada, Mr. Guy Berthiaume, who is sitting beside of me, and also Dean Wendy Duff, who is Dean of the iSchool at the University of Toronto. The University of Toronto Libraries and Library and Archives of Canada have enjoyed a very close working relationship over many years, and I'm deeply grateful that this collaboration has made it possible to make this extraordinary collection, the Marshall McLuhan collection, available to more researchers around the world. I also want to welcome today Robert Fisher, who is the Senior Archivist at the Library and Archives of Canada. We're delighted to have him here. I want to acknowledge the McLuhan family who are not here today, but they've been instrumental. So Michael McLuhan, Eric McLuhan, and Marshall McLuhan's grandson Andrew have been instrumental in helping make Marshall McLuhan's library, which we'll talk about a little bit in a few minutes, available to scholars from around the world, as well as the archives that are held at the Library and Archives of Canada. As well as Henry Rodriguez and his wife Kathy, who aren't here but who've been instrumental in helping us as well acquire the amazing library of Marshall McLuhan. So we're deeply grateful for their generosity and their willingness to make this material preserved for the future, for all times, for scholars who are interested in McLuhan's extraordinary work. She's also not here, I don't believe, but I want to acknowledge Ann Donderman, who's retired as Associate Chief Librarian for Special Collections and Director of the Thomas Fisher Library, who helped put together the Memory of the World application that resulted in the designation today. And John Shoesmith, who is here, where are you, John? Over here, for his extraordinary work as well on this. So we're pleased that everybody's here today for this special occasion. We're thrilled that Marshall McLuhan's personal library and archives have been added to the UNESCO's Memory of the World Register. As you may know, his library is now housed at the Fisher Library, and his archives are housed at the Library and Archives of Canada. McLuhan was born in 1911. He was a University of Toronto professor, a public intellectual, and a cultural theorist whose groundbreaking insights into electronic media changed how we perceive and understand the world today. I actually first heard of Marshall McLuhan when I was in library school, learning my master's in library science, and I remember a lecture from one of the faculty members at the University of North Carolina on Marshall McLuhan and his theories of communication. And I remember being just quite actually amazed at some of the things that I was hearing. His books have been translated into at least 17 languages and are found in national collections across the world. His personal archive and library comprise 50 meters of archival documents and 6,000 published items, mainly books, dating from the time of his undergraduate studies until his death in 1980. Created in 1997, the Memory of the World Register protects and promotes the world's documentary heritage. To be included, collections must have global significance and outstanding universal value. And this collection, the material in this collection certainly meets those criteria. It is unique and it is irreplaceable in the world. It is comprised of original material created, annotated, and disseminated by McLuhan throughout his career as he directly engaged in and influenced the cultural, intellectual, and social context of his time. His interests make this material a cross-section of the crucial moments of change in the 20th century cultural history that today supports research in many, many disciplines at the University of Toronto and around the world. He annotated the books, the published items in his research library heavily, and these annotations document how particular works inspired him intellectually. So it's possible to look at these annotations and really trace the sort of origin of, trace his thought patterns as he began to think about the theories that he became famous for. It includes 3 copies of Finnegan's Wake. I assume he read all 3 because they're filled, and I haven't read Finnegan's Wake all the way through once, I will confess, but they are filled with his annotations, and again, one can trace his thought processes through that. Many of the works in his research library have significant iconic, emotional, and financial value in that they are presentation copies inscribed by authors such as the architect and designer Buckminster Fuller, the anthropologist Ashley Montague, and the painter-writer Wyndham Lewis. Such presentation copies and their inscriptions are unique evidence of the international exchange of ideas during the 20th century, providing unique insights into mutual influence between McLuhan and his peer networks. No other material intimately reveals the evolution of his ideas, foretelling the global impact of electronic media. So in this sense, McLuhan's documentary heritage is not only an archive of the past, but an archive of the future. These extraordinary collections will now be preserved and made available to anyone in Canada and anyone around the world in perpetuity, jointly through the cooperation of the University of Toronto Libraries and the Librarian Archives of Canada. It's a rich addition to our global documentary heritage, and we're delighted to have been chosen as stewards of this unique material in partnership with the Librarian Archives of Canada. So I'd now like to invite Mr. Guy Berthiaume, Librarian Archives of Canada, to say a few words. He has been a great supporter of libraries and archives across Canada, preserving Canada's cultural and documentary heritage at the Librarian Archives of Canada, and in partnership with many libraries across Canada. It is a delight to be a partner with him and the Librarian Archives of Canada, and it's a delight to welcome him today to the University of Toronto Libraries for this occasion. Guy.
Merci, merci beaucoup Larry de vos mots si généreux, et merci de votre accueil ici au Thomas Fisher Library. Thanks for hosting us today. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here today because this is the first time Librarian Archives Canada, as part of its collection, recognized by UNESCO's Memory of the World. And it is indeed an honor, and an honor we share with the University of Toronto, and we're proud of it. And it is fitting that in the digital era, the first one of our records being recognized is about McLuhan, the man known as the prophet of the digital age. Our collection, which we acquired in 1984, is a treasure chest of materials such as 43.6 meters of textual records, 375 photographs, 275 prints, 58 audio cassettes, 17 drawings, 24 video cassettes, 21 film reels and 1 microfilm reel, 3 plaques, 2 medals, one is with us today, and 1 printing plate. Of course, McLuhan's correspondence and the manuscripts of his writings, books, articles, essays, and lectures are at the heart of the archival collection. I'm especially proud that the documentary heritage added to the UNESCO Memory of the World Register today contains his research library, which has been since 2013 part of the University of Toronto Libraries, the largest academic library in Canada and one of LAC's most important partners. It was a pleasure for LAC and for our senior archivists, Robert Fisher and Andrew Horrell, to make this nomination to UNESCO with UTL and to work with them to create the web exhibit called Virtually Reconnecting Marshall McLuhan's Archives and Libraries that links the 2 collections. Both UTL and LAC are committed to celebrating the legacy and memory of a great thinker who arguably belonged to the world as much as he did to Canada. Larry already alluded to the fact that McLuhan's documentary heritage is not only an archive of the past, but an archive of the future. This statement is so true, and we could expand on this so much, that we have decided with our UofT partners to join force again next spring to host a seminar on that very topic. So stay tuned. I'd like to conclude by quoting the vision of the Memory of the World program. The world's, and I'm quoting, the world's documentary heritage belongs to all, and it should be fully preserved and protected for all, and with due recognition of cultural mores and practicalities, should be permanently accessible to all without hindrance. With the inclusion of the Marshall McLuhan Archival Collection and Research Library in the registry, I'm convinced we've taken a huge step closer to achieving this vision. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy, very much. And I'd like to now ask Dean Wendy Duff, Dean of the Faculty of Information here at the University of Toronto, and a great partner as well of the library, almost in our building. She doesn't have to go outside to come over.
Sort of attached at the hip.
Attached at the hip. I'd like that. No, Dean Duff has been a great partner with University of Toronto Libraries, but there's also a strong connection to Marshall McLuhan through the high school, so I'd like to invite her to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Larry. We are thrilled to hear the news of the new honor for McLuhan. The iSchool is actually the McLuhan Center, which some of the buildings that you saw in the back are a part of the iSchool, or the Faculty of Information. And we are very honored. It was interesting when we talk about the legacy of McLuhan. There is the archives, of course, that are so important, but there's also the events and seminars that McLuhan had and always held while he was almost living on this campus at the Coach House. And those Monday night seminars go on. We still have a really exciting, vital program as part of that and looking how to push forward. So I'm very thrilled to hear about the seminar and ways that we can attach. I also, when I heard about this new honor, I thought about Sarah Sharma, who's the director of the McLuhan program, and her new Insight grant, where she wants to visit the archives both here, which is easy, but also for funds to go to the National Archives and look at the records to understand how these McLuhan thoughts could be looked at again through more of a feminist perspective and what that would say about the thoughts of technology and media. The other thing I thought of when I heard about this great honor, I thought of another great Canadian, F.R. Scott, who's not nearly as well known and has probably never had his saying on a T-shirt. Nor let alone being recognized when I wear this T-shirt that people know that it's McLuhan. And F.R. Scott, when he was leaving his room in Chancellor Day Hall, he wrote a poem about the people from the archives coming, the rude and rough men who were invading his sanctuary. He said, as they boxed it up, "I alone know the secret thoughts in these cabinets and how the letters relate to the pamphlets in boxes. I alone know the significance of the underlying on the pages read closely. You scatter these sources abroad, and who shall use them?" And I thought, whoa, that's another prescient way, was exactly what happened to the McLuhan records. People came in, they were scattered over the two sites. He had both the underlying and his incredible archival material. And yet now, because you've put this material together digitally, we know who will use them. The world will use them. And I can think of no greater honor of McLuhan than this wonderful, and Canada, in fact, this wonderful award and recognition of the importance of this site. So there is no question, I think, that he is incredibly prescient. We had our conference last year that had people from all over the world coming to Toronto to really study the thoughts of McLuhan and ideas of how it moves forward. So I just congratulate you both on obtaining this award, digitizing this material, and making it generally available.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Dee. That concludes our formal celebration of the inscription of these collections into the memory of the world. I would just reiterate what Dee and Wendy have just said, that we expect to have in the spring another event that will be a further celebration of this Memory of the World designation, a scholarly event, hosting scholars, McLuhan scholars, talking about some of these extraordinary collections and what's in them. So that concludes our remarks, but I believe that Robert Fisher and John Shoesmith are actually going to talk about some of the artifacts from both the archives at LAC and the McLuhan Library that are displayed in front of us. So we will turn it over to Robert and John. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for you, those of you in the room, they're actually going to talk about this, and there's going to be we're going to continue to film for Facebook. This is all being broadcast on Facebook, in case you didn't hear that. So they're now going to move the camera, Liz is, and put you all on Facebook.
You want to start?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome, everybody. So when you have 6,000 items in the library, it's pretty tough to sort of choose three. But I've tried to choose three things that are fairly representative overall in the library. And of course, we had to bring up Finnegan's Wake. As Larry said, there's several copies of Finnegan's Wake as part of the library. It was Joyce was one of McLuhan's real obsessions. He always claimed, I don't know if anybody's tried to read Finnegan's Wake, it's pretty much impenetrable for most people, but McLuhan claimed he cracked the code of Finnegan's Wake. And it's great to see this particular copy that I've brought, because it's rare in several ways. I mean, first of all, it's a first edition. So it's the 1939 hardcover, printed in London. So in that respect, it makes it rare. But what makes it doubly rare, obviously, was that it was McLuhan's copy, and it's probably the best example in the library of how McLuhan annotated his books. Of the 6,000 pieces of material in the collection, I'd say half of them are annotated, and many of them are very, very heavily annotated. And I think what that means ultimately is that you can see McLuhan's relationship, his intellectual relationship with books. I mean, McLuhan was a reader. His ideas didn't come out of nowhere. They came out of really extensive, deep reading. And he actively engaged with his books. And this is a great example where you can see, I'll just go through a couple pages here, where he's basically annotated almost every page. His son, Eric, as well, also worked with this book. So the annotations are in two hands, and we actually, in the finding aid, all these, I should mention, by the way, all the books are listed. There's a finding aid PDF on the website, in the catalog as well. And the finding aid also indicates how heavily the books were annotated. And it also explains the different hands too, whether it's Marshall McLuhan's hand or Eric's hand. So as you can see, I mean, this is essentially very, very heavily annotated. It's going to take, we hope at some point to have the technology to be able to crowdsource these annotations. That's something we'd like to do down the road, because no one person is ever going to be able to go through this entire book and note all the annotations. But you can really see that his active engagement with Finnegan's Wake in particular. And there's another copy that we have of Finnegan's Wake that actually is really thick, because his students at Fordham, he was at Fordham for about a year, had a special copy of Finnegan's Wake produced where they had text on the recto page, and then the versa would be blank, so he can actually annotate to have his notes in the book. So it's pretty interesting. It's hugely thick. So that's one example. And one of the reasons I brought this up as well is because people tend to forget that McLuhan was an English scholar. I mean, he taught primarily English for his entire career here at University of Toronto at St. Mike's. So, we always think of McLuhan as cutting edge in terms of his ideas on emerging technologies. But really, a lot of his ideas were originally immersed in English literature. And so the library collection has a lot of great examples of his reading interests, whether it's Joyce, whether it's T.S. Eliot, Wyndham Lewis, Ezra Pound. It's a really fascinating collection. So that's one book I brought up. And another book I brought up is less about English literature, more about what people think more about McLuhan in terms of his ideas around technology. And this is Lewis Mumford's Technics and Civilization. This is also a great example of how his technique was in terms of annotating. He would really write extensively on the book jacket, on the end papers, and with corresponding information, the page numbers, and his thoughts in terms of the material that's in the book itself. Has some shorthands as well, which we've identified in the finding aid as well. So his annotations changed over the years, where his early annotations would really be extensive, but then as he sort of went on and maybe doing a lot more reading, he came up with his own sort of shorthand with some of the annotations as well. So again, two interesting examples that show McLuhan's interest both in English literature, his interest in emerging technologies. And one last thing I brought out was one of the great things about the library, and one of the great things we did when we cataloged the library, is McLuhan would read and would stick in notes, would stick in newspaper articles, all sorts of things. He would tip into the book. He would just lay into the book as he was reading. And so what we've done is we've removed all those materials, created a separate finding aid, which first of all says what the book, where it's being removed from the book, the page number, and really what it is. So I took one example out from that tipped-in material, and it's a letter he wrote to T.S. Eliot that he never sent. So it was a draft of a letter that he wrote. Very interesting document. And according to Eric McLuhan, Marshall McLuhan felt intimidated by T.S. Eliot. So he wrote this letter, never sent it. He was basically soliciting T.S. Eliot to write something, and but he never did send it. So again, 3 interesting examples from 6,000 that we could have brought up. So, and with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Rob.
Thank you, John. Again, the McLuhan Archive is a rich treasure trove of material, over 40 meters of manuscripts, personal and professional correspondence, drafts of his books, articles, periodicals, and to choose 3 items is a challenge. But we opted for items for to have some visual impact in a sort of display. The first item here is a portrait of McLuhan. It is in profile, and it was used as a part of a montage. What we don't see there is an image with all of the ideas and people he's influenced that are superimposed on it in other uses of that portrait. It's perhaps one of the lesser known portraits of McLuhan too, one of the less published ones. The second item we have here is the medal, and this in submitting and preparing this application, we discovered that there had been a UNESCO Teleglobe Canada McLuhan Medal awarded, sponsored by Teleglobe Canada and under the auspices of UNESCO, with an award of $50,000 to an international scholar working in communications theory or making an impact in it. And that was awarded through the 1980s and 1990s. We don't have the original medal in our collection. It's been awarded to people who've received it, but this is a prototype designed for that by Dora de Petrie Hunt, who is a well-known Canadian sculptor and artist. So we thought it was an interesting item that tied in UNESCO and showed that McLuhan, his relationship with UNESCO goes back further than just this nomination to the memory of the world. And the third item we have is a draft page from the manuscripts. Do you want to come around and get it from the right side up? And it is the one page out of maybe 17 meters of pages in the manuscript series, but it is a first page of an early draft of Understanding Media. And what I particularly like about it is, of course, the expression, "the medium is the message." Right up front is the title of the chapter, with struck out the words Narcissus as narcotic, struck out and then put in "the medium is the message." We don't believe it's his first use of the expression, "the medium is the message." One of his biographers tells us that it came on a plane trip to San Francisco in 1958, but this is an early use of it in an early draft of Understanding Media, and it's this text in this shows his insight and shows his ideas coming to life. He writes at the beginning, the content of any medium is always another medium. Speech is the content of print, and print is struck out, and then of the written word. And the written word is the content of print, and print is the content of the telegraph. And this idea comes out more in Understanding Media, and this page sort of shifted position in the actual published version of Understanding Media. But it shows how his manuscript writings show how his ideas evolve and change over time, and how he, as close as we can come to seeing his insights first take shape. So I think that's all I have to say in particular about these 3 items. But
Great, thank you,
Yeah.
Thank you, John, and thank all of you for coming. And again, we hope to have more items displayed in the spring, and a symposium that will talk more about these great collections, and the scholarly impact, the impact that Marshall McLuhan has had on the world over the last 50 years. So thank you all.
Thanks.